All right, and welcome to the CodeX Cantina. I am Una.
And I am Father Crypto.
I see what you did there.
That one I thought of
I was
all
going to say
day.
that was a premeditated one.
Yeah.
All right, so this week we are going to be doing the Letters from Father Christmas by J.R.R. Tolkien. And there's a couple of different versions, so I don't know what version that you have.
I got the one off of the Kindle. I think it's the one that was republished like in the 70s or something by his estate.
Do you have the cave drawings?
Yes.
I do not. So mine is this version where they actually have reprinted in the letter, like they've got the letters that are just like literally in these like fake envelopes that I assume were kind of like looking like what the envelopes looked like. And they'll have his printing here, where it's like all, kind of like a shaky calligraphy with a date, probably how it looked when he actually did it. And then when you flip it over onto the back, you've got the facsimile kind of translation here,
That's
which
amazing.
is what I read because it's almost near impossible to read some of this writing.
Yes.
Depending on what you start with.
Some of them I just completely, I looked at it briefly for a second. I said, yep, there's no way I'm wasting, 3 or 4 minutes trying to decipher that handwriting. I do enough of that when grading essays with my students.
Okay, so real quick, if you weren't sure what this is, the man, the myth, the legend, J.R.R. Tolkien, part of, I think this is more prominent in British culture from my understanding, is that the kids will write letters to Father Christmas. Sometimes they will burn them in the fireplace with the idea that the ashes carry them away to Father Christmas of what they want for Christmas. And sometimes, the parental figure, hey, if you're under 13, get out of here, first of all.
Not the channel for you.
Not the channel for you. But then what would happen would be the parents would write back to them, sometimes as Santa Claus. And these are a collection of the man, the myth, the legend, Tolkien's writings back to his kids.
Yeah, great correspondence. I love it between the kids and him. And it's really cool because it goes over many years, like 2 decades, right?
Yeah.
Because
I think so.
Felt like they kept writing them because it was a good way that they were connected with their father through like adulthood. They must have, because it in the book it goes through like all the different years that they're writing back and forth.
So first of all, what we do here is typically like literature breakdowns. This is obviously very different since these are private letters, right? Like he didn't intend for these to be released into the public, but I'm very thankful and inspired to do this for my family, actually. But let's talk about what we see in these letters. What's something that kind of jumped out at you that you think people would be interested in?
I think the pictures. I know that's kind of funny because we're all about the literary breakdown here and getting deep into how writing is done and all that good stuff, blah, blah, blah. But I think one of the coolest things of this are all the pictures that he and his kids are drawing that go along with these letters. And I think that that's something where you could sit down and at family time, you're going to sit down with your kids and you're going to read, all the cool Christmas stories and stuff with them. But I think this is a great one that you can sit down with because it's going to captivate the audience of a younger crowd, because there's going to be pictures to go along with these stories. And some of the pictures are really cool and really interesting.
You know what I wanted to bring up? This kind of leads into one of my points. Now, in the beginning, so like this first picture, I think is actually probably, to me, the most captivating. The way the red suit comes, and then you have kind of like this ice castle with red accents saying, hey, this is what I look like. And then when you look at the letter that he wrote for this year, this is the 1920 letter that he wrote to John. It's very simple. What I want to kind of to bring up here is you'll notice how big his text is here, but how few prose there is. And you'll notice that the picture is kind of like the climax of the story. This is kind of how you write children's literature, where the drawing will be kind of the climax of what's happening, and you use the prose to kind of lead up into like the rising action and the falling action, as well as kind of like what the emotional outtake is, because a lot of times you write about emotions when it comes to children's literature. And a lot of times that's kind of how these first few sections are structured. You may have noticed there's a main point, right? Like the bear lit off these fireworks that created the aurora borealis. That's the climax of this story. And then he's got the writing that talks about how the bear made a mistake and how he feels. He's got this one where he's falling down the stairs. Right?
That picture's hilarious too. That picture's great.
And it deals with emotions too, which is wonderful to talk about with kids. That I know he didn't write this for the public. Like, these probably were never meant to be released. But you can see very clearly that he's wonderful at writing for kids. And we didn't do The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings on this channel. But one of my main points, I did a different book chat for those. And one of my points that I had with that is that those were written basically for his kids. Like, I found basically quotes from C.S. Lewis at the time that talked about how he would practice orally telling these stories to his kids, kind of seeing what worked, what didn't work, and he'd revise and edit and go over and continually improve these stories until eventually they became published and kind of captivated the public's interest. I think it's interesting to see how much he cared about his kids and how the byproduct is something that we've been allowed to enjoy publicly as a result of those efforts. That's kind of what these letters are too. It's something he created for his kids, but I'm wonderfully engaged and entertained by these, the fact that they were released publicly.
Yeah. You said one thing there, and I don't know if it was a different author or were they buddies? Were Tolkien and Lewis buddies?
Yeah, they were both authors at the time.
Yeah,
but
I didn't know they were like friends.
Obviously, if he told him that story, okay. I'll see if I can find that article. It's something I did The Hobbit. I want to say like a year ago that I did the kind of like this analysis and breakdown. So I'll have to see if I can go dig up my notes. I've got notes on them. So
yeah, well, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I mean, that series is one of my favorite children's fantasy series ever. So I love that, and I didn't know that Lewis and Tolkien were buddies. And
well, obviously close enough to have at least had that conversation.
I really liked how this one, you see the progression of how the stories age. And so you were talking about how in the beginning they have like this moral principle, but I think over time you see how the relationship between the children change with their father. You see more children added in as he's having more children, and that's kind of cool to see this. But you really get a snippet of just their lives during Christmas time, which a lot of times brings out the best in us. But you can see in some of these stories and letters, and I don't have any quotes for this, but in them, and they're short, you can go read 3 or 4 of them in just like 10 minutes, that they're trying to deal with some of their personal issues that are going on in their lives as they're growing up, and you're seeing the kids get older and how they're dealing with, maturing and becoming young men and young women, and dealing with honesty and dealing with dating. And he turns all of that into these creative stories with the polar bears, and the polar bears get hurt all the time.
Yeah, well, it's probably that parental thing of stop doing that. Like, kids are so impetuous. The bear is the kids, and Father Christmas is Tolkien in a sense. And I know he allegedly hated allegories. I don't care. There's very clearly lessons in some of these stories that he's talking to his kids about.
So one other real quick thing on there that I thought was really kind of traumatic, like if you are reading this with one of your kids, and they're little, like one of them talks about, him like burning his nose off. Another one talks about like chopping his paw off. So, I mean, it gets pretty kind of graphic for a little kid. But I think that those are letters that are written in like the 1930s, early 1930s. So the kids are teenagers at that point. So you can see the evolution of the writing becoming more and more relevant to their different ages. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, no, the writing definitely evolved. Like the letters got longer. Like they turned away from being a picture driving the story and the prose kind of supporting the rising action, falling action. Towards the end, it was the prose was the story. Yeah. And then they're like, oh, and here's a picture of the bear, trying to warm his feet in a bath because he's cold. Like, it was like the picture became, after the fact, it became more of adult literature as opposed to children's literature.
And to follow up with that is eventually what happens is you see not only this story showing the evolution of them in their family, just the how many of there are, like 5 or 6 of them, but also the outside world finally influencing them. And this one, I do have a quote to support this. So they introduce a new race of creatures in the story, and that's the goblins. And this is very obviously the representation of the Germans. And you can see that the letters become more geared towards violence and defending oneself. And there's funny pieces of it, but then it becomes very, very serious as well. And there's one part that is obviously very much referencing to the Blitz, where London is being bombed. And so I want to quote one of the letters. I think this one's from 1938. And it says, "Luckily, goblins cannot help yelling and beating on drums when they mean to fight. So we all woke up in time and got the gates and doors barred and the windows shuttered. Polar bears got on the roof and fired rockets into the goblin hosts as they poured upon the long reindeer drive, but they did not stop them for long. We were soon surrounded." That is definitely the Blitz, and the sirens that are going off to, alarm the London citizens that the German planes are coming. And I thought that was pretty cool to kind of maybe like comfort his children while World War II is literally happening around them.
Yeah, it's showing them it's like a global problem. Santa's going through this too, right? And I'll tack on to that. You'll notice that in the letter for that year, goblins is the only word highlighted in black.
Yeah.
Right? Black being the symbol of bad, evil, right?
It could have been 38 because the Blitz was in 40, I think.
This was a 1933 letter.
I'm just wrong on the year of the Blitz is all. It's a 39 or 40 letter that quote is from. But the goblins are introduced when we see the rise of Germany, and then you see the goblins become very violent as we ramp up into, the Blitz and the Blitzkrieg across all of Europe, and Germany starting to take over everything and becoming very violent.
Did you just like trill your Krieg?
Like, oh yeah.
You went deep. Look at you. Yeah. Okay. The only other thing that I would add to that, so if you're going to bring up like the war and the real world economy impacting things, you'll notice some of these letters talked about how he's missing presents, how the Bears smashed them, or they're behind on schedule due to the wintry weather. There was a depression, worldwide depression going on, right? Like it started, I believe, in what most people would consider the U.S. and kind of spread. It impacted the entire world. I don't know, but I speculate that this talk about not having as many presents this year, this is why it's a little skimpy under the tree. This is why Santa's missing out on the presents. We didn't get the presents you wanted, but we got these instead. I think that has to deal probably with the depression, not having, the family not having enough money this is pure speculation, but not having enough money to buy the exact presents that the kids wanted.
No, I think that's a great explanation. And then, like we were saying, you could sit down with your kid and, hey, mommy got laid off from her job, and you could read this letter and kind of see, maybe a kid wouldn't get as much, but it would help you maybe have a tool to explain to your kid of why there aren't as many presents this year and why they're not getting an Xbox and, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, I think that's really great. I think these stories are just, they're heartfelt, but they're also great teaching tools. And as you said already, I love that we're able to get this glimpse into his personal life with his children. And so I ask you this little trivia question. Do you know who collected them and got them published?
No. Is that listed in the foreword? Because I know mine says that it's prepared by Bailey. I don't know how to pronounce her name.
Yeah, so his youngest son's wife collected all the letters and got permission and was able to get them, collected and then published and so on and so forth. So, yeah. So we have her to thank for all of this.
Now, this is different because it's not like he wrote these to be public. Thank goodness they did. Are we rating this?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think that's...
Let's do it differently. I don't want to do a 1 through 10 because that feels like a disservice because...
That's not fair. Yeah, he wasn't writing this for us to critique.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right. So let me just... Okay, I don't know how to... So I didn't plan this in advance, but let's just do this. Let's jump to the ratings that we do in the wrap-up.
Yeah, that sounds fair. And we can just kind of reiterate real quick when we do the wrap-up.
I'm very easily to collect it. I think you should get the nicest copy of this that you can. I think it's very beautiful the way that he took the time to write to his kids. He used this handwritten calligraphy and talked about how he's old, and you'll notice that the age of Father Christmas is exactly how old AD timeline was. I think that was kind of cute. I think it's something that's fun to go over with your kids. I think it's inspiring to share memories like this with your kids. I think it's worth buying a fancy version of this that you can.
I agree. I would go with collected on this. I think that this should be something that is set out as a centerpiece on a coffee table during the holidays. So when you have your Christmas tree up and your lights
Oh,
and
yeah,
your wreath,
yeah.
and somebody comes in and they, you make them some hot cocoa, and they sit down, and sitting on your coffee table, you have the bowl full of jellies or whatever, or a plate full of
Yeah.
cookies for Santa. I think this would be a nice centerpiece. It could be I've seen your copy of the book. It's a beautiful book. To be able to pull out the letters, like really pull them out and sit down with your kids. And we don't do fun things like that anymore because of email and all that stuff. And I think this is definitely a collect it. If they have a cool $30, $40, $50 version, you could buy on Amazon to set out as a centerpiece, I think it's something to invest in. That's going to be a conversation starter too. Be like, oh, I've read, Tolkien, I've read Lord of the Rings or watched the movies. I didn't know he did this. And
Yeah, I think you set it out on your coffee table. Someone sees it, they'll flip through it and think that it's pretty interesting. And I think it's fun to talk about. So, all right, guys, if you'd like to have more literature and discussions on some of the great classics, that is something that we cover regularly here on this channel. Please consider subscribing if you'd like to join in on that conversation. I'm Una, and peace out.
peace.